Introduction of multi-party democracy in Ghana in the early 1990s has paved way for electoral competition for state power. And as a result, Ghana has since held 6 successive elections to the admiration of the global community. While the frequency of elections and the advancements in the quality of democracy in Ghana has generated a sense of optimism for multi-party politics, this development has been closely accompanied by pockets of election violent acts, however minor, that have been reported in different parts of the country in almost all elections conducted in Ghana since 1992. Recent electoral violence that surrounded the by-election in the Taliensi constituency in the Upper East region, where there were reports of sporadic firing of gunshots and attacks with machetes during the conduct of the polls, resulting in the hospitalization of victims and destruction of vehicles and other property, is one of the many instances of electoral violent acts in Ghana. Although Ghana has seen little or not much incidents of election-related violence, lessons can be drawn from much more worrying trend of election-related violence, especially in some of the countries that share close boundaries with Ghana. One can observe that in the past few years, violent elections have occurred in countries such as Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Democratic Republic of Congo, Sierra Leone, Senegal, Liberia, to mention a few. A more common scenario has being that of low-intensity violence, widespread coercive intimidation of both candidates and voters, including harassment, imprisonment, and assassinations. Violent riots and clashes between supporters or security elements of the competing political parties, and attacks on local party headquarters and party symbols. This inadvertently poses a threat to security and to peace of such countries and the continent as a whole, and sustainability of the democratization process in these countries. Can Ghana as a country withstand the ugly consequences of widespread electoral violence across our country? Are there any steps that stakeholders must adopt as a matter of urgency to mitigate any potential electoral violence that could be associated with the 2016 polls? I hope today's lecture will give answers to some of these questions and throw more light on these issues by the speaker. With this, I wish to state that I accept to chair this function and believe that you will all help me to bring it to a successful end as we pay attention to the speaker, Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, Executive Director, Institute for Democratic Governance, and also to the lead discussant, Samson Ladi Ayeni Esquire, the host of Joy Newsfile, which is very popular. I believe that at the end of the day, the lessons that we will learn will help us to promote peace and to ensure a violent-free election. Thank you very much.
My topic that was given to me by the university was to speak on towards the credible 2016 elections the role of stakeholders in ensuring free, fair, transparent, and violent-free elections. First of all, I think, for me, elections are a means to an end. They are not ends in themselves. So, in a democratic society, citizens of a certain age, I think in Ghana, 18, who are citizens, not anybody votes in national elections. These are the presidential and parliamentary elections. In some other countries, you may not be a citizen, but you can vote in local government elections. So, but in Ghana, it's very strict. So we do periodically, as you know, every 4 years, we do have this presidential and parliamentary elections together. But you know, we have another type of elections in our system, which is not party-based, district assembly elections. That's for local government, but political parties do not participate, are legally, barred or prohibited from participating in local government elections, district assembly, and which are more individuals presenting themselves. But not many people believe that the parties are not involved. But even if they are, it's informally. It's not what they do with the presidential and the parliamentary. So if you look at it carefully, the elections enable us to choose our political leaders, the party-based one at the central government level. We choose the president and we choose parliamentarians. And when we choose them, we give them a mandate to run the institutions we call the executive and parliament, where they make the laws. The executive is the government. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about roads and energy and power and hospitals and in the campaign, as the government is giving account of what it has been doing. So, but what we want from them are two critical things: that they would provide public services that are inclusive, and they would also make sure that they raise our living standards, they improve our conditions of living, they provide security, police, education, health, housing, roads, jobs, mention them, so that if you're Ghanaian, you feel that yes, in your country, there are conditions for you to meet your aspirations, and you are happy. And then we also expect them to be accountable, because there's a lot of resources we give to them. The president elected has a lot of power, a lot of resources, controls institutions, has a lot of influence, represents us, raises loans, taxes us, and determines the priorities of the country and so on. And has a lot of people he works with in ministries, departments, various agencies of the government, and also controls local government. So we give this power for 4 years, and we expect them to deliver certain things for us. So in this election year, you could see that the president once went around and it says accountability tour. He's telling the people what he has done. We also know we've entered a season where we are looking at party manifestos, what they are telling us they are going to do for us to solve the problems they understand are our problems. And I hope you are engaging them to let them understand what your problems are, and probably pointing out to them that what they have in their manifestos are not responding to all your problems, or you need to see them more sharply defined. So the credible election process is one that says that it is the major decision-making time for us as citizens. And during this time, our politicians are very close to us. You see them. They visit you, they talk to you, they open up, and sometimes even when they offend you, they apologize. because you are going to exercise power. Your vote is your power. In that vote lies the decisions that you want those you elect to parliament and the president, okay, to make for your welfare and improve your life generally. So I hope amongst you, nobody is going to talk about, this year I don't feel like voting, so I wouldn't go and vote. Yes, it's true that our two parties, MPP and DC, they are very giant parties. I'm going to talk a bit about them, but they have so much power and somehow they've polarized us. We are polarized along the two, but there are smaller parties too. It's a multi-party system, but I think your civic responsibility is to vote, don't abstain, and vote in an informed way where you've looked at their manifestos, you've read them, you understand, ask, what do you need? What is it they're going to do? What problems have they solved? What more do you want to see done? And please engage the candidates, talk to them, because you only have this chance once every 4 years. And if you don't use it well to make the politicians know that you expect more from them, 4 years is very quick in coming. I think 4 years, many of you would have left, graduated, and probably become politicians yourselves, and manning every institution of the society, helping to grow the economy and build strong educational systems and be in the civil service and be enterprising and so on. So elections are critical. And the thing about credibility is that it is competition, it is very hot, and when you have two parties in this kind of competition, our system as we have designed it sometimes makes it very, very competitive. It's like two giants competing. And you will see how they become the giants and how the nature of their competition sometimes leads some of their members to do things that undermine our confidence in the process and also in the results that they produce. So, but it's a real world. It's a human world. Sometimes administrators make mistakes, like the election officials. Sometimes, there are problems with the voters register. They can't find your name and how it's handled. It's a very strictly rule-based process that tells you everything, how to resolve problems, and if you violate them, there will be a challenge. But we do have problems with credible elections in our country. Where I would like to start from then is to tell you a bit about our governance system and why increasingly credibility of elections or having credible elections has become an issue. Let me begin by telling you that our democracy, we call it liberal democratic, but it's also very participatory. Okay, it's a multi-party, we have several parties, not just the two parties. I hope you know we have over 20 parties in the country, but they are small. Some are active, some are not active, and you know that 12 of our presidential candidates of the small parties have been disqualified, but it's an issue that they are still pursuing in court and talking to the EC as well. So we have 4 candidates on the ballot now. But party elections, as I said earlier, is at the national level, presidential, parliamentary. And then local government is not based on party elections. At the time they fixed the system, one of the important things that we were told is that it was the formula used to secure the stability of our democracy. Because, in Ghana, you remember the 80s, we had revolution, and they used to talk about the voice of the people, people's rights, participation in this true democracy. I hope you're reading about our history in the 80s, 70s, 80s, from independence on, and you see the revolution time and all that. So there were 2 traditions, those who like parties and those who do not like political parties. So our local government system, for example, was not party-based when it started in 1987. But later on, the whole world changed. attitude towards multi-party changed, and there were pressures from all over, from within Ghana, internationally, and so on. So having parties at the national level came later, an afterthought of a sort. But it brought the true traditions we have in our country, those who believe in parties and those who do not believe in parties together. So that you have those who do not believe in parties, they see the local government not party-based and individuals participating, and they are okay with it. At that time, there was a lot of cynicism about party politics. They said it was divisive, it would exploit our ethnic and regional and religious divisions because the nature of the competition, people wanted to win and so on. It was corrupt, a system that encouraged a lot of corruption because of our experiences in the 50s and 60s and so on. And it wasn't too popular. Some said it was not good for Africa and it wouldn't help us develop. So that tradition was strong in the 80s as well. So you had the two major political traditions in the country, those who believe in parties and those who do not, all brought together in the Constitution. And this arrangement between local government and not party-based and central government that is party-based was like a compromise. You see, sometimes we describe it as the historic compromise. They were going to govern together in a way. But many years on, we know that the turnout in our presidential and parliamentary elections is one of the highest in the world. Consistently, it's about 80% in the last decade and more. And when you look at local government, it's around 30%, but 2015, we got about 40% thereabout, but it's always been low. So it's like half of the people are very active in local government elections, but where the parties are, a large percentage, twice that number, 80%. And sometimes many people wonder, it's part of the reasons why the world thinks highly about Ghana's democracy, that you constantly have 80% turnout. In America, sometimes they don't get 40%, the total number of those who vote. So the polls you read would not be 80% of Americans voting when on the 8th of November, when that happens. But the important point I want to make is that 24 years, this system of our democracy we call the Fourth Republic, the Constitution promulgated in 1992, I think we've come a long way. And we are quite comfortable. We've accepted multi-party politics. It excites us. It mobilizes us. And we are not too opposed to it, although we have a lot of questions and concerns about how the parties, especially the two giant parties, conduct their business, the fear they cause, the anxieties they bring. But we are also not happy with the small parties, whom we feel are not doing very well. And some really would agree that probably they shouldn't exist, but you need them. The other aspect of the system that is important that we should remember is that after every election, the system somehow closes up. Once we've chosen our president and parliamentary system, a lot of power is in the executive. And we use a certain term. You know, many of you call it winner takes all. In the executive arm of government, where the president is, opposition parties have no role. They are not elected into local government, so they don't participate there. And they lose the presidency. It's only the presidency, that is the elected, the office open for multi-party elections. But there is so much power there. Okay, the budget, the economy, whatever decisions affect our lives come from there. And that's where they are concentrated. So the way our parties have, conducted business creates a system that we call exclusion. There is political exclusion. If you don't belong to the ruling party, and that's the president's party, and the ruling party usually controls the majority in parliament, you can't participate you are not appointed to any post in the executive arm of government. And sometimes too, the way the projects are distributed and implemented creates the impression that, party people tend to be more favored than non-party people. Sometimes people talk about it in terms of regions, and they talk about this in terms of ethnicity, and so on. So, yes, we all participate in the elections, and we're excited and high turnout. But after that, we move into what we describe as a politically exclusionary system. Okay. Now, the Vice Chancellor told us about the number of elections we've held. We've done 6. This is the 7th. Now, the 6 we have done has given us recognition globally, especially the 6th one, which said the Supreme Court had to determine who won, and after the Supreme Court made this decision, we accepted it. There was no demonstration or street fight or guns anywhere shot, but we moved on with our lives. What it did was that in Europe and various parts of the Western world, it gave us a new upgrading. We are now called Africa's matured democracy. You see, so it's called as high because of the behavior, how we handled conflicts and so on. But if you go back to the 6th, you would find out, especially from 2008, it is very difficult for a first round win, 50% plus 1. In 2008, for instance, we had 2 rounds of presidential elections plus 1 election in 10. Okay, that wasn't open to all of us. You know, that was a place where they didn't vote for in the presidential election, but it became necessary for them to vote there. So 2 rounds of presidential elections plus presidential election in 1 constituency or 1 area, and that determined the results. And the margins were quite little. You would also see that after that, in 2012, we went to court. Okay, so what it tells us is that the idea that our elections would always produce a clear winner and we would all accept and so on, since 2008 is becoming very challenging. But we had it in 1992, although it was also a controversial elections when the NPP boycotted the presidential elections. Okay, but 96, NPP was back in parliament, they accepted it. And then President Rawlings then won. In 2000, you know that NPP won the election, and it was a 2nd round election. But in 2004, it was a 1-round election, but it was also controversial because that was the first time that the idea of going to the Supreme Court to determine who won the election started. It was the first time we went to the Supreme Court for the results to be determined. And it was the late President Mills as opposition leader, NDC, that went to court. But President Mills did not endorse it, and so the judges at some point, dismissed the petition. So 2012 wasn't the first. We had one. Now, I'm giving you these examples to show that our democracy also has certain dynamics. And increasingly, it is becoming difficult for us to determine who won the elections. And the competition is very stiff around the presidency. As for parliamentary elections, we don't have too many problems there. Yes, people protest and they go to court, and sometimes the court rules, sometimes there are reruns of the elections, and so on. But it's the presidency that has become, that which determines whether it's going to be peaceful or not peaceful. So if we follow this trend, then what we see is that we may say we are peaceful, we have peaceful elections, and after that is stability. But there is something I call the paradox of our elections, a contradiction of a sort, which says that our peace and our stability, because we've done 6 elections, is also matched by fear of violence and destabilization of our democracy. It's a contradiction, you see, because if you're doing very well in elections and it's democratic and the results are credible and it's accepted and so on, why do we feel threatened at the next election? The more progress you make in democratic elections, then the expectation that violence or the fear of violence will go down because we've internalized it. It's a clean process. Nobody cheats. The results we believe are right, and so on. But that is not Ghana anymore. We question the results. We don't trust the results. And it means that we have a system now which is one that says, I call it a paradox, a contradiction. We have peace and we are stable, but we also have parallel to it fear of violence and fear that the democratic system would collapse. This is the situation we are in. And I think it's important for you to understand this so that when I come to start talking about the issues that credible elections in 2016 should confront, you would understand. So I have done this to show you that I'm not just talking about elections. Have you registered? Do you know your polling station? Have you checked? Did you go to the exhibition, queue, vote, and then go home and come back when they're counting? No, because elections are a means to an end. It's a very important process by which we can change the economic conditions in which we live, by which we can put pressure on our leaders to do well, by which our social problems and development needs will be met. So it's a very serious process, and we should take that into account. There is a third part of our system which I also want to describe to you. Although we say it's a hybrid system, it is a system that our governments do everything, they think in 4-year cycles. And so they can't go beyond it sometimes. You've heard about the 40-year development plan that the NDPC is working on. It's the first time we are going to think very far. But everybody says, is it possible since our governments are elected every 4 years and look at how our elections are and so on? The system we've operated now is one that thinks in 4-year cycles. So decisions are made in that 4-year scope. Now, in that 4-year time frame, our elections do not allow us to even implement the policies that will transform our lives systematically because it's filled with so many elections. After the presidential parliamentary, you have local government elections, 2 years. It's called midterm elections, the district assembly. Sometimes we don't have money to finance it. So we have not had a fixed date, like December 7th, which is the date, or when we wanted to change it to November 30th. Then you know that just about after the presidential and parliamentary elections, our parties, those who lost, will retreat a bit, but they come back after about 3 months, and then they'll start their internal elections, okay? And starting their internal elections means there will be some fight in MPP, NDC. Usually the small parties are the ones who come last. They sometimes come after 2 years, after the local government elections and so on. So what you find here is that our system has an election overload, a lot of elections, and they are not so strictly regulated. So it tends to make it difficult for us to know what period, what is the season. Some people call it election season. What is the election season in Ghana? The presidential campaign for this year's election, NPP started its presidential campaign, I think, already in 2014. And then NDC immediately also followed. So we have the longest campaigns we can ever think about. How is it financed? Who finances it? And you hear expressions like monetization of our politics. So our system has a lot of people financing it that we don't know. They have a lot of money. We don't know where they get the money from, whether they are hard-working, patriotic Ghanaians paying their taxes and the taxpayers' money, we don't know. Whether they are some criminals with a lot of money who are sponsoring our parties, we don't know. And the institutions charged to do this find out where this money is coming because there's a clear law on this. Those laws are not enforced. So there's a lot of money in our politics, and winning, especially the presidential election, is crucial to those who are financing And that also itself has come to define why our elections are becoming turbulent, why we are so scared. Radio stations are being, a lot of radio stations, we have about 400 FM radio stations registered on the books. I'm told that about 330 of them are active. And you know, they are split, ownership is split between MPP and NDC mostly. So, and it's all focused on winning elections, presidential, especially, and parliamentary. You know, no president wants blouse and skirt. They want to control parliament, they want to control the president so that they can govern smoothly. This is the system we are working in, and these are very serious characteristics of the system. So when we are told that, oh, we have a very credible and peaceful system, it's stable, it's peaceful, and we are the best democracy, please pause, ask questions, and do your research and read and ask yourself, how can we sustain this democracy, these features of our democracy? Is there anything we can do to control them, or we cannot? When it comes to managing the economy within this democracy, we have seen a system where the government has a very short time to do the big things it wants to do, possibly 2 years, because sometimes there's transition. After the transition, they select their, you know, selecting and appointing their minister takes about a year. And it tells you something about the parties. Our parties, we call them election machines. They do not prepare to govern. They have no structures within the party that is constantly looking at higher education and how to improve it, how to finance it, how to bring it, digitalize it, bring technology, and so on and so forth, how to grade it and become one of the finest. And so they don't spend time in the 4 years before another election, presidential, thinking about this. They don't have units handling economic policy, social policy, development policies. They don't look at trade and so on. When you go to the parties, they don't have the structures and they don't have the bureaucracy handling them. All of them, big or small. Yet, they are the ones we elect to come and handle the economy. And yes, they have qualified people. There are a lot of lawyers, like my colleague Samson, very good lawyers. They have accountants, they have engineers. But these are people who join the party. The party itself is not growing its leadership and so on. And they govern, and they do a lot of elections because the power at the presidency is what you must have, and you can come and you govern in a certain way. But this is the problem it's creating for us. Every 4 years, we don't know when the elections start, but you know, a lot of money is spent. Government, we suspect, spends a lot of our tax monies or borrows heavily. There's always a deficit after elections. The economy is not in good shape. Inflation is high. Sometimes we realize that we spend too much and it's all elections related. But there is no serious regulation. And we ask ourselves, why? The opposition may not get the taxpayers, but they also spend a lot, and we don't know where their money comes from. So at the end of the day, how do we define credible elections? Would it just be that we voted, the results came, and we said it's fine, and we went away? Or is it one that says, after we've mandated the people, they are also able to do the things they should do to meet the expectations we had on public services, on accountability, enforcing the law, on creating better conditions for more people to be educated, get jobs, and so on and so forth? These two, for me, are linked. That is why I looked at credible elections the way I do. Now, to the extent that these problems persist, you will find that our democracy is fragile. And it is fragile in a very serious way. There has been some data that have been presented to us lately by various, please can you go to, by various survey institutions, credible, Afrobarometer, Mo Ibrahim, the IMF had come with some of them and so on. And they have said that in the time of this democracy, we have done very well. Our economy has grown in the last 24 years, averaging about 5-6%. Our incomes have grown, GDP grown. You know that now our per capita incomes are high. I mean, individually, I think we are around 15,000 or more. Okay, so we are middle income. Or you don't feel middle income? No, you are middle income. Whether you feel it or not doesn't matter. So we are seeing a lot of progress. You've also seen that really there's a lot of infrastructural development, roads, housing, schools, universities. How many universities do we have now, and so on and so forth. So we're also beginning to see quite a bit of positive construction is going on, developments are taking place, transformation, our cities and so on are changing, and I'm sure UCC is also seeing some changes. So investments are going on, all right. But one of the things we've been told, which is very disturbing, is that the IMF says that all these progress that we've made have brought our poverty levels down, but you know that the northern part of the country hasn't seen the significant changes, although poverty levels have dropped. But the bombshell is that inequality is, widened, has grown bigger. So yes, we are building roads and so on and so forth, but when you come to the quality of life, how that wealth is distributed, access to good water, housing, or jobs where you live, and all that and so on, it's not the case. We are one of a few African countries actually in the top range. We also have a situation where we are told that public services, I just want to move on as I'm explaining a lot. Public service delivery in the country. Can you please get to that data for me? Public service delivery, the people feel very dissatisfied. Okay, the latest data shows that average about 60% people or less will be satisfied with healthcare, with access to education, public transportation, police, security, and all that, but the rest of the country is not. And that also suggests that what we expect from our democracy after we've elected our government is they're doing some things, but probably not at the level that will satisfy us or would address the developmental challenges we face at household level, individual levels, and also communities, and then the entire country. So this is the feature of the system we are operating. And in every election, it has been like that. The crucial point then that I want to tackle is for us to now begin to say that if we have peace and stability, as it said, and that has made us, the world like us so much, we have a middle class expanded, we have inequality, we have dissatisfaction, we have poverty in our country, then how do we solve these problems with elections? And how do we conduct the elections such that when we have made our choices, it will be clear to all of us that it is going to deliver what we need? 2016 elections present us with that reality too, with that challenge. And I think for this election, some of the things that is really frightening to all is that increasingly the multi-party system has become not only a two-party system, but it has become what we have termed in IDEG, a duopolistic system. It's like two monopolies. And if you look at the data presented to you, you'll find out that, just look at it from 92, 96, 2000, you'll find out that we had something that was maybe quite seriously multi-party. NDC at 58.4, MPP 30, and the small parties were there. Okay, if you go to 2000, when MPP came to power, 43%, 56, 6.7. If you look at 2008, one of the critical elections we had in the country, 50.23, 49.77. Look at small parties. And if you look at 2012, still you see the two parties, but look at the small parties, 1.56. So our multi-party system probably has become two giant parties. Some like it, they say it's like the American system, but the American system, Ghana is nowhere the American system. The institutions that regulate parties and financing and expenditure and so on is different. They have real serious institutions and public servants who do their work. Some presidential candidates in past elections, in 2012, for instance, one candidate was forced to, presidential aspirant was forced to quit when they said he had used some of the monies he raised to entertain himself and his girlfriend and all that. It was a whole lot of investigation. But have you heard of anything like that in Ghana? So let's not compare ourselves, but let us look seriously at the new reality of our multi-party system. Two monopolies. They are not regulated effectively. Recently, the EC said parties must comply with the law on financing parties, opening offices, annual reports, expenditures, and so on. And it was assumed that the small parties were not doing it. They don't even have offices. So the EC said, well, those parties who do not have these things, they will take action against them. The small parties got afraid. I mean, we convened a meeting of them in Accra and said, look, talk about your common problems and speak with one voice. And they said, well, is this targeting us? But eventually they agreed to submit their reports. Our two big parties did not submit their reports, but nothing happened to them. The second observation about our two big parties is that their membership is almost equal. In 2014, they were about 14 million each. They have offices all over the country. All of them have been in government, and they grew. They became big parties in government whilst they were in government. So should that mean that parties who do not have a chance to be in government would never grow? Is it the reason why our small parties are now just 1.56% of the votes they get in our elections? So when we go to elections, we call it multi-party elections, but really, it's a two-party system. And it is indeed one of the worrying trends we have that I would want to address now, rising electoral turbulence, which has a lot to do with the emergence of these two parties as duopolies in our system. They are involved in a fierce power struggle, very fierce power struggle. And they cannot, nobody regulates them. They are very rich parties. And elections that involves them, let's say it's now a two-party thing, what you see is that they do everything. Let's start with registration of voters. Registration of voters, which is important because in every election, a voter register is compiled specific to that election. And in 4 years, new citizens qualify to 18, come of age, and they should be registered. So it could be limited. You also have those who missed it the last time who would do that and so on. And there's always an opportunity to update. We've moved and so on. In 2008, the EC introduced what we call limited registration. And it's very expensive compiling the register, millions of dollars. Sometimes they spend over 100, changing from the 2008, what we call the manual photochromic data, to the 2012 biometric data cost over 200 million. I hope I'm right, Ladi, with my figures. It's a very expensive enterprise. Now, what happens is that the competition between these two parties is also sometimes, transposed on the electoral register. In 2008, the two parties, have strongholds and so on, and they were mobilizing minors, people who do not qualify to vote, to register. That problem that we've discussed, or everybody was talking about last year and early this year, about the integrity or credibility of the voters register. It has minors. Some say, well, they were minors who registered in 2012, but in 2016 they are adults. So we should leave them there. We can't get them out. So they are there. Then, you know, the nature of the colonial boundaries and how they've split us across borders and so on. Both of them actively get people to register. They bus people from one side to the other. And so many things. They even do it in Accra, in Kumasi, in Ho, and various places. So there's a deliberate effort to gain advantage over the register or in the register, and that means that consciously things are done that shouldn't be done. It's against the laws, but it happens. And it's been difficult to deal with this problem because when you go to IPAC, these are also the two big parties sitting with the EC to make decisions and build consensus. So there is a problem here, our voters and the behavior of the two parties, which I think we should take seriously. There are two parties that have done well for the stability of our democracy because all the reforms, if you see how transparent our system is now, that you can count ballots, you see transparent boxes, and you are at the polling station seeing everything, the declaration of the results there, you can go to the collation center. No country, I've been to many African countries on election observation mission for AU, ECOWAS, and no country has the transparency we have in Ghana about how, as citizens, we can just walk in. I was in South Africa after the elections last year, 2014. I was surprised that citizens were not there. It was only the Election Commission officials. They call it the Independent Election Commission. And some few parties, not all of them came. They were the only ones, plus us, the observers. And I said, wow, could this happen in Ghana? You know, and where they count the ballots, it's not outside. They are in big halls like this, but the doors are locked. You can't enter as a citizen. You don't have accreditation. You can't. So it's only the officials and some few party people. And it goes. In Ghana, you can't do that. They will not accept it because we become used to the open system where, but you see, the more our systems have become transparent, the less we trust them, the higher the mistrust we have. So there's a certain disease we don't know how to cure. You know, seeing everything, we still don't believe, and so on. And not seeing, you know, but I think it has to do with how our two monopolistic parties, we call the duopolies, are behaving. Consciously, they do the wrong things that are against the law, but nothing happens to them. You know, when they go to their party conferences, you hear a lot about who was distributing, giving people 4-course breakfast. You know, and I think sometimes the police are there, but you see, nobody gets arrested. There's a law against treating that is intended to corrupt people. You know, and sometimes they distribute money, we are told. You know that the last election, CPP, there was all sorts of claims, but this is going on. Now, I'm pointing all this to tell you that the reason why we find it difficult to accept that Ghana does credible elections is not simply the day we voted and the results, but all these things that have taken place have undermined our confidence, our trust. You know, we know that some wrongs have been done, but they've not been cleaned up, and we live with them, we accept them. You know, sometimes the EC has said, oh, all these complaints about fraudulent practices and so on, they are true, but they really don't change the results very much, even if we disqualify those voters. The judges also do that sometimes. But what it does is that, so let it go, let the results go. We are tolerating practices that are immoral, we feel violate the ethics. Why would a minor get into the register? But we are all culprits because we know and we don't report. And we know that our nephews and nieces who shouldn't be in the line join the line, and we close our eyes. Sometimes we would even argue with the election officer who challenges that, hey, are you 18? And before your nephew or niece could, you have answered for your nephew and say, yes. Ocean now say we did 19. You see? So we have undermined the integrity because we've tolerated wrongdoing. And the two parties have operated it effectively, and we have bought into it. We have acquiesced, that is the word. So we have problems with our voters register, and sadly, we spent over 200 million to get a biometric register, which has the advantage, it's technology-based, it's superior. It uses your fingerprints, and your fingerprints are unique to you. You can't give it to your wife, your girlfriend, your child. It's only God who gave it to you, and he can take it away from you. So it has a certain superiority over the manual registers we were using. But we managed somehow to find other ways of undermining our confidence in that register. Why? Because we got minors to get in, and we got other people to get in certain areas we couldn't check. Communities condoned and connived. So now the biometric register that is of such superior quantity that many things cannot be done. For instance, you cannot do multiple voting with the biometric. They'll catch you. Multiple registration has gone down considerably, and multiple voting is something you cannot do. They will still detect you. And apparently, with the new EC chair, if she catches you, you are going. And the police are saying they'll prosecute. So it's a different time. So please, tell the wards, the minors we know who are in the register, that even if you're in, don't go 2016. Because if anybody challenges you and they could scrutinize it and so on, you'll be in trouble. But that is the nature of the challenges we are facing with credibility of our whole electoral process. And unless we can begin to address some of these things, it is going to affect us. So I've addressed the issue of the rise of the duopolistic parties and what they do, and what I call the upsurge of unscrupulous electoral practices. That's what I've talked about. It has undermined the integrity of the process, and we are all part of it, condone one or the other. Now, there is a third one that I think is very worrying. We do not trust the Electoral Commission. Their impartiality, their professionalism. We think that if you go to the EC, you will find MPP, NDC, and they are the ones control. We believe our perceptions and our imaginations much more than the facts. So it is creating a problem, and it's putting, of course, they make mistakes, administrative lapses we saw during the Supreme Court proceedings and so on. But sometimes we should also look at the professionalism and the impartiality and so on, and feel that the results that come probably are what they are. But we say, no, it can't be. They did this, they did that, and so on. So we have created a very serious problem. And I chose to discuss this with you because I want you to have a deep appreciation of the credibility problem we have in our democratic system, especially around elections, ballot, voter register, and so on, and our behavior that has dealt with this. Let me move to the fourth key point. Okay, and then I'll wrap it up so that I don't consume all your time. If you go to, the recent trends of violence. In 2016, one of the things that is confronting us, apart from all the issues we've had with the voters register, fortunately, when you take the register today, the Supreme Court intervened in a way that has helped us clean some of the things with NHIS cards and all that. But still, it's relieved us, but still people think there are other things, that needs to be patched. But increasingly, we are beginning to see that the two parties are also resorting to 3.3 are also have militant wings, and the use of weapons is also coming into our politics. And that is also very disturbing. I mean, and some hold AK-47. You remember this Talensi by-election? There is always violence in our politics, but they are localized, you know, from independence to now. So there's nothing. But the army and some of the names, Azoka Boys, Bolka Bulldogs, and so many others, we've seen violence in various places. This is the mature democracy of 2012, 2013. And this is what we are seeing amongst the two parties. And I think it is quite serious, and we should find a way of dealing with that. We have had various groups speaking about it. The police say they are handling it, and fortunately, they're saying that the parties have come to some understanding that they will not condone these things, and they are going to deal with it as closer to elections. They would disarm, they would arrest, and they are not going to tolerate. Now, can we go to the regional hotspots? Towards the 2016 elections then, we have learned from the police that there are 81 hotspots. They are saying it's probably increased to 100 and something. These are the potential areas where there could be violence. And so you have Upper West region, 3 places, Upper East, Northern Ghana, and Greater Accra. They come second to Ashanti, which has 14. And they are trying to, and this is data from the EC to the police. And I think more have been identified. So the issue of violence and where it could occur, no region has been spared. But fortunately, there are limited areas that we need to target and see how we could engage there. How have we dealt with some of these issues? You see, violence of any kind intimidates people. It causes fear as a threat. So some people may not vote, go to the polling stations. And you know, in certain areas where the competition is very stiff, if your supporters don't go and vote, your opponents are able to mobilize their voters and motivate them and so on. So violence is sometimes used to discourage voters from the opponent side to go and vote. And then you get advantage. There are a number of these things that happens. And, you know, these days the media helps in reporting some of them. But again, we have a system that sometimes, I don't know how we take on this and what punishments are meted to discourage or deter further action. But that is a crucial thing that happens. How have we dealt with this? You know, sometimes we have, as civil society organizations, CSOs, as media houses, you know, they post these journalists all over the place and they are able to report on what is happening. The police, we have the churches, the Christian Council, the Chief Imam's office. There's so much being done to check some of these incidents which are affecting the credibility and the integrity of the electoral process. It has helped us get through very difficult situations, 2008, 2012. But 2013, the police are saying they are very well prepared. But there is also a new concern on the table, which is that probably it is not before or during elections that we should worry about, but we should worry post-elections, after the elections. Because there's a belief that a lot of people who are not members of parties are frustrated with the democratic system because they are not giving them jobs, they are not getting what they want in the country, they are a bit hopeless and they think the system is not working for them. So if there should be another conflict over results, maybe it will be a frustration for many who could then get on the streets protesting or whatever. And that, for presidential elections, could happen all over the place. And if it does, it could create chaos. And if it creates chaos, then possibly we are going to get the police and the security agencies acting to prevent any breakdown of law and order. And we've also heard that from the Chief of Defense Staff that they will back the police and make sure that they defend our democracy and all that. So this is the new thing for 2016, whether we will see our post-election violence for the first time in our country. And we are hoping that will not come to rest because the security agencies are working well. But we think that there are a number of things. Yes, I know you are coming. I'm almost there. We think that there are a number of things that could help us go through this situation. And I'm going to talk briefly about some of the things you can do to help us make sure that at least we would have peaceful elections and we would, to a reasonable extent, have credible results that we can deal with. First of all, you know, there's the National Election Security Task Force, which is working hard, educating the public. It brings customs, fire service, prisons together with the police, the army, and the IGP is head of it. And they are going to embark on very extensive education, interaction with the public. They are doing that already. And they are dealing with the parties and telling them that they are, in fact, they are now more proactive, arresting, questioning politicians, and crimes are things they take up, and they've said they are going to prosecute people and all that. So that is one of the areas where we're going to see the intervention that would help. And what they need from us as students, as citizens, as voters, is for us to alert them quickly to things that are happening that they must know so they will be able to report on them. And I think it's a very good thing. The second thing is that the judiciary, you know, the high courts, the appeal courts, the Supreme Court, they have also been, the Chief Justice has been quite active. And you know, there are some 17 courts that will speed things up. And they have come up with a new manual on how those who disagree with the results, what procedures they will go. So things will be fast-tracked and the problems resolved, which is also extremely good, and the alternatives that they will pursue to deal with these problems. The Electoral Commission itself is saying that they are going to do the best to give us very professional elections. So we should try as much as possible to rely on the institutions and not take the law into our hands. But I think what is important for us as citizens is also for us to begin to think hard about the post-election. We do not know the results, who is going to get 50+1 and move on, or who is not going to get it, and we will go into runoff. The thing with runoff elections is that every time we've had runoffs, the competition gets more turbulent. The language, the insults, how we tell ourselves, you know, some of the languages are so bad, I don't want to use them, but we exploit every division as if we are enemies. You have seen some of the experiences when even the runoff have produced a clear winner and transition has to take place. You see how the parties, those going and those coming, how they fight. Sometimes they are not even able to do the handover. There's a boycott and there's a fixed date for swearing in and all that. So the turbulence of our system goes beyond the voting and the campaigns and the preparation. And we haven't addressed them. There's a law on transition, but it still doesn't stop some of these things from taking place. So how do we intervene also in the post-elections? I think that I'm going to mention these 4 things and then wrap up. 1, I think from now on, it is extremely important for us to be able, as students and lecturers and so on, to put on our citizens' cap and help educate, go on radio stations, participate in various fora, just to educate people on the strength of the voters' register as a biometric register, and which you cannot do multiple voting, and you cannot do a whole lot of things without being caught. So it has some superiority. So many rumors you would hear that some people who were not registered came and so on. Please, if you're well informed about the vote biometric, you see that there are limitations to that so that we can dismiss some of the propaganda that are likely to come. Two, I think it is very important that we also try to build hope in our system. Some of the solutions in the manifestos, let's discuss them. Let's enrich the issue content of the process. But more importantly, I think we have to prepare ourselves to be very vigilant. Let us make sure that everybody qualified is encouraged to go and vote. Nobody should be discouraged or intimidated. And if you find any situation like that, tell the police. They are going to have so many other posts. For civil society, we have what is called the situation rooms. We have international observers. We have local observers. If you alert somebody to something happening that is not good, they will take it up. And if the information is credible, action will be taken. There are little things we must do to move us forward in this election and not allow violence to take place. There is a third way that I think, or fourth, that I think we can help. You know that after voting, sometimes after the polling station results are declared, we go. But this time around, the advice is, let's also take place in what happens at the collation centers. But know the rules. You have to keep some distance. Sometimes, some of the places don't have light. Okay, you know doomsaw is a problem. And it could occur not because it's a plan, but doomsaw occurs. However, you know, with smartphones, we have light. Charge your phones, help as citizens, but do it objectively. Don't go there because you're going to act as if, because it's your party, all the wrong things should be done and you condone and so on. It will affect you because any violence would affect all of us. Our economy thrives on what is termed as the peace that Ghana enjoys, okay? Finally, I think that we should not just look at elections. Let's encourage our parties to talk and tell us how they are also going to deal with the issues that will stop this turbulence in our elections. How do you stop the winner takes all? There is a campaign going on, all the work that the Constitutional Review Commission did and the Constitutional Review Implementation Committee did. They have not been implemented. Okay, you know, our presidents have told us and the ruling parties have told us in the past that they are going to open local government, will elect DCEs. Some are saying open it to the parties. There is no decision. All the things that if we did, we can strengthen, start cleaning up the system and believing in its credibility and integrity have not been done by our politicians. And it's part of what has complicated the problem. So my advice to you is that let us also find a way in which we can engage the parties to look at these big problems. And of course, those who will commit to say, well, this time the reforms will come about, but you have to build consensus and so on. That kind of approach will be extremely good for us. So to sum it up, we have a very complex situation ahead of us. Credible elections in 2012 will require that we have a deeper understanding of the complexity of the issues, and we as citizens, we are going to give them our vote. It's our power. It gives us an opportunity to also engage them a little bit more on what they can do to bring the level of violence or threat of violence and the fear that our democracy will collapse down. And in a democracy, you need to build dialogue. You need to talk about issues. And let us also talk about it. In that way, I trust that we are going to have a more complex approach or multifaceted approach to ensuring the credibility of our elections, because we will not just see the voting and the results counted, but we would also know that the system is going to be strengthened. Maybe dialogue will continue after the election, transition will be managed, but we just have to be vigilant also on those things that will bring about greater peace and stability in our system. Thank you.